I'd like to welcome everybody to the library tonight for our talk on Thelonious Monk. So, Eugene, very happy for you to be here tonight.
Very happy to be here, thank you.
Eugene has been the artistic director of the 33-year-old Vermont Jazz Center since 1997, where he has produced over 150 jazz concerts, and counting, I'm sure. He received his master's in jazz performance and graduated summa cum laude from Queens College in New York as a recipient of the Hubie Blake Scholarship. He has performed or recorded with Sheila Jordan, Jade Clayton, Dave Stryker, George Mraz, Bobby Bradford, Jimmy Heath, Donald Byrd, and other jazz greats. He has taught through the northeastern United States and Colombia, South America, and at universities, festivals, and clubs. He's an adjunct professor of music at Amherst College and Marlborough College and the Governor's Institute of the Arts. With over 120 original compositions, 3 of these were recorded by Latin jazz star Sammy Figueroa on his 2005 Grammy-nominated CD, In Walked Sammy. Eugene Uman has been recognized for his work in the community as well and received the Community Person of the Month Award for facilitating an annual series of free public jazz and Latin jazz concerts over the last 6 years. He serves on the board of directors of 3 organizations and is adjudicator for the Vermont chapter of the International Association of Jazz Educators, the Vermont Arts Councils, and others. Here's what jazz notable Jimmy Heath says about Mr. Uman. In a world where mediocrity reigns supreme, it is nice to hear music of substance and integrity. Please welcome Jimmy.
Who are you talking about? Hi, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Jerry. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart, and I see a lot of people who are here who are very dear to my heart, so I want to welcome you all. Thank you very much for being here and supporting me and supporting the music. It's very important to me. And before we get on our Thelonious Monk track, I just want to let you know that in my estimation, hearing music recorded is great, but hearing music live is incredible. So I want to make sure that before everybody leaves that you take a program booklet. We've got some here for the Vermont Jazz Center because we have a stellar year coming up. And I mean, it's amazing what's happening now that we're able to get such big names now at the Jazz Center. I think that with the plummet in the economy, most people are looking to play out. And so here we go, in little Brattleboro. The person who's coming on the 25th of September, his name is Robert Glasper, and he's a Blue Note recording artist. And in the past, we've never been able to get anybody from Blue Note before. And he plays in a hip-hop style. He's fusing jazz and hip-hop. So it's going to be some pretty intense music, I'll warn you there. But on the other hand, it's also a music that's very original. And who are we here to honor today but America's true original piano player, Thelonious Monk. So I think that I just encourage you all to come to some of our concerts. The one that's happening on October 9th, again, it's amazing that he's coming to the Vermont Jazz Center, is David Liebman. He's a saxophone player who this year won the NEA, the National Endowment of the Arts, Jazz Master Award. This is one of the greatest honors of the country in jazz, and he's going to be playing for us on the 9th of October. So that's just a couple of the events that are happening at the Jazz Center, so I want to encourage you to do that. Okay? With that said, let's launch into America's true original. Let's talk about Thelonious Monk. Before we talk about him, though, let's watch him. Because he's just an amazing individual, and when you see him, as they say, pictures speak louder than words, but a video speaks volumes. Then we'll be able to watch a video of Thelonious Monk playing his great composition called Blue Monk. And then after that, we'll talk a little bit, and then we'll run through the history of Thelonious Monk. This is not Monk. lights, that would be great. When we listened to that video and watched it, there was this. What did it make you feel like? I want to get. What was the piano? What was it? Give me some comments from here. What did it make you feel like when you were watching this? Anybody?
Unsettled.
Unsettled. Percussive.
Maybe for loose. The way he seems so easy and loose about it, you know?
Loose and easy.
Happy.
Happy.
It's funny.
Unsettled and happy and funny all at the same time.
Bebopping.
Bebopping.
I got chills at first.
Chills, huh?
Nostalgic.
Nostalgic, yeah. 1959.
It's a big year, Chad.
It sure was. All of the above, and I think that's the thing. You know, people hear the word Thelonious Monk, and they want to like Thelonious Monk. You know, it's like there's this image that he brings up, and we all just want to play his music. We want to like him, even sometimes when it's unsettling, because it is unsettling at times. And how do we get closer to that music? How does it affect our lives so that we do feel these tingles, you know? How do we get closer to that? And that's the way that when I listen to this music, I find that the deeper I go into it, the more I understand it a little bit, because I still am learning a lot. And I feel that it's one of these, he's one of the few geniuses that ever existed in this music that changed the face of the way we know music, especially jazz. So what I did was I read this book, which is a killing book, and I highly recommend everybody going out and buying it. But while I was reading it, I'm reading it the second time now. The first time I read it was back at Christmas time, and I had my iPod with me, which had about, you know, a lot of Monk on it, and I listened to it while reading the chapters about certain recording sessions I could go and listen to. It was very rewarding, and I highly recommend you try doing it that way. But now, when I went back to read it the second time, I did it much more carefully. And fortunately, because I'm an adjunct at Amherst College, well, you know, they've got the box sets, and there's another one, and then I had all of my CDs, which, you know, this is my Monk collection, you know. So I'm pretty fortunate that I had all this stuff to listen to. But because we're so fortunate with YouTube and all that kind of stuff, you can actually go and get access to the music. So like I was saying, it's so important to hear music live. It's also important to listen to music while you're reading. If you're going to be reading about a jazz musician, it really behooves you to go and listen to it, because it just makes the experience so much more rewarding. This is a great book. I read a bunch of other books on bunch here that, from my collection, but this book by far is the best. Well researched and interesting. You know, very colorful stories.
Who's the author?
Who's the writer?
Robin Kelly, and I know that I think Jerry, you said that it's going to be going.
It's in the library.
It's in the library, and it's going to be available in paperback soon. At any rate, this is a great book. Highly recommended. One suggestion about the book, something that I didn't particularly like, but you might, is that the beginning of the book talks a lot about like what they thought his history might have been, at least the history of his family. It goes back to slave times and all that kind of thing. I just wanted to get to the music, you know? So for me, that was a little bit pedantic. But once you get past about page 80 or so, it's just amazing, because you start cruising and you start coming across my favorite characters. And so let's start there by talking about the music and some of the points of Thelonious Monk's life. Let's start with a quote. John Coltrane. Anybody ever hear of John Coltrane? All right, this is what John Coltrane had to say about Thelonious Monk. I think Monk is one of the true greats of all time. He's a real musical thinker. I learned from him in every way, through the senses, theoretically, and technically. So to have John Coltrane, another one of the masters, say that he's learned from Monk in every way, through the senses, theoretically and technically, it must mean that there's a lot there to offer. And again, when we listen to Monk, sometimes we think, oh, he's just kind of like sloppy, or he's just, you know, he's like playing. But after listening to him really deeply, what you find is that that's really intentional. And that I would say 99.9% of the notes that he plays are completely intentional. And that he's not just kind of going crazy. He's really doing everything for a reason. And the more you listen to it, the more you hear that logic. And I believe that's what John Coltrane was talking about. Let's follow with another quote from Bud Powell. Now, who was Bud Powell? Mr. Bill, will you tell us who Bud Powell was?
Bud Powell was one of the first bebop pianists was one of the first pianists to join this new wave of bebop that was surfacing in the mid-1940s. And you know, he had a he was a great pianist.
He was a great pianist, and one of the most important pianists in the jazz canon. And actually, he was one of Monk's students, interestingly. When Walter Davis Jr. asked Bud Powell whom he should listen to after Powell himself, of course, Powell replied, Monk. If I had Tatum's technique, that's Art Tatum, and Monk's mind, there would be no other piano players. Wait, forget Tatum. If I had my technique and Monk's mind, there would be no other piano. All right, so we're talking about a mind. You know, that's what Monk is all about. He's somebody who brings something original, creative, juicy to the forefront. Okay, he was born, let's go through some of the easy details. Born October 10th, 1917 in North Carolina. They moved shortly to New York, so his history is really from New York. In 1922, they moved to New York City. They lived in the San Juan Hill neighborhood in the 60s, in the West 60s. And at that time, it was the largest black ghetto in the New York area, before Harlem. Okay, we're talking in the 20s. And there was a lot of trouble there at that time. But nonetheless, it was a very tight-knit community, and there was a very important sense of helping the kids through community centers. Back in those days, there were very important community centers. And he went on later in life to support community centers through doing benefit work, which is something that many people don't know. He went to school at Stuyvesant High School down in the East Village, but he did not graduate. Well, we don't need to get into that. Something that happened very important in 1934, he went on the road with a holy roller, okay, for 2 years. He went on the road with a Pentecostal priestess, a woman. And very unusual, to go on the road, he went all over for 2 years, all over the United States. So imagine what he was doing back in that impressionable time. That was something that formed his sense of identity, his sense of swing, and his connection to the gospel. In fact, one of the things that he's known for is playing gospel music. And if you go and check through, for example, this particular wonderful box set has some very cool gospel examples. Okay, getting back to New York, moving quickly, he got his union card after coming back on the road, and gets to hang out with the heavy. There's a seat here if you'd like, Miss.
How many seats? Because
There's three.
Four.
Three. Could be four. Four seats. Five. Do I hear five? Okay. 1939. He's now 22 years old. He gets his union card. And Monk becomes one of the heavy hitters. He hangs out with James P. Johnson, Fats Waller, and Art Tatum. I mean, this is back in the day of the ticklers. That's what they called them, the piano ticklers. They tickled the ivories. And he would hang out with these guys, and they would have what was called cutting contests, where they would play one tune, and they would try to see who could outplay the other one. There's a story of Billy Taylor, the great pianist who's still around and who's one of the advisors of the Jazz Center. And he said that he once went and didn't know what was going on and played a piece for somebody else, and he found out that it was one of the ticklers who had wrote it, and then they came and outplayed the hell out of him. So, you know, and Monk was in that group. So just to know that Monk had this like real deep sense of history and could play stride piano. Stride piano is when you get the left hand going boom, chick, boom, chick, and we're going to hear that in some of the musical examples that will follow. Okay, I want you to just know that sense of history that he was connected to. It's almost like a ragtime style, the stride piano. Okay, let's see. Teddy Wilson is another one of those people. Okay, now we've arrived at the time when we can get some recordings in. 1941, Minton's Playhouse. Is anybody familiar with the name of Minton's? M-I-N-T-O-N-S. Good. Minton's Playhouse was a club in Harlem where a lot of the musicians would go after hours. The owner of the club would give free meals to musicians, so he would get all the musicians to come and play for the others. So it was his way of kind of going, come on, let's have a jam session, and then all the other people would come in and buy drinks and meals. And it happened after hours, after the other clubs had closed down. And for 2 years, Monk was the house pianist at Minton's. And because of that, there was a lot of the musicians who were off duty would come up and hang out with Monk because they knew they'd get a free meal after the gig, right? And also because Monk was a great piano player, and he was playing with Kenny Clark on drums, so there was all this like exciting activity. And people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie would come by and just like explore their ideas because it was late at night and everything was kind of casual. It just so happens that there was a college guy who was really into recording things at that time. His name was Jerry Newman. And he recorded a session that happened with Thelonious Monk and Dizzy Gillespie in 1941. So let's listen to a little bit of that. And this is like the first example that we have of Monk being recorded. So it's working. This is at Minton's. Hear that Monk sound? Don Bias. Dizzy. Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off, Dizzy. But we're here to talk about Monk. That was live at Minton's. And let's move now to the next phase of Monk's life, was in 1944. Do you have a question, Richard?
Is it okay to ask questions?
I guess, yeah.
What would
As
you
long as it's not too long.
Right. What is had bebop started? In other words, if you were going to that cut just then, is that swing? Is that bebop? Is it somewhere in between? What would you call it?
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that. That is like a harbinger of bebop. The melody is definitely a bebop melody, but the way the drummer was playing was kind of stiff compared to the way that, let's say, Max Roach would have played it. I'm not sure who was playing drums on that cut, but it kind of had a little bit of a swing feel to it. And I'm glad that you said it, because what's happening now is we're going to go and listen to Monk playing with one of the real kings of the swing style, Coleman Hawkins. Now, you remember Coleman Hawkins, he was the great saxophone player. What was the famous song that he played?
Golly, I can't remember.
Body and Soul. Da, 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 da. He made that very famous in 1939. It was a huge hit. And he was in Europe from 1934 to 1939, and then he came back and he was looking for a band of the younger cats, the cats who could kind of help him get from the swing sound up to the more bebop sound, the sound that had more of a kind of a flow rather than, instead of feeling it like ding, 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 it's more kind of across the bar line, more hemiola for those of you who know that language. And so what we have now is an example of Coleman Hawkins playing with I'm sorry, Thelonious Monk, how could I forget? So, at any rate, we have an example now of this great classic swing tenor saxophone player who wants to play like a bebopper, but never really does, you know. So we get to hear this kind of combination of swing, this mesh of swing and bebop. And this is happening in 1944, okay? So this is Coleman Hawkins playing with Thelonious Monk, and you'll hear that it doesn't quite fit, all right? I mean, at least in my opinion. It's still pretty neat, but it doesn't quite fit. Coleman Hawkins with Monk. Hear that sound? Very swing sound. Totally different concept. So that was Monk with Coleman Hawkins. Now, Monk at this time was considered, they were starting to realize that this was a special guy who had his own language, you know. Back at this time, we're talking in the mid-40s, it was the development of bebop. And who is probably the most important person in the development of bebop? One person. Charlie Parker, right? And Dizzy Gillespie was also one of the most important people. And probably the reason why they are so important is because they developed a new language. And, you know, we could get into Richard's question for a whole seminar, because it's a great question. What is bebop? And essentially, in a very, you know, to describe that in a nutshell, it goes beyond, it's a rhythmical sense of being. You know, bebop is, it comes out of swing, but it's a more advanced understanding of the chords. So people would not, instead of be playing on the arpeggios, they're approaching the arpeggios using leading tones in many ways. So, ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. So you've got a bunch of chord tones that you're coming at, ba-da-do, ba-da-do, ba-da-do. So you're kind of going towards the chord tones. It's a very kind of up and down thing. You're thinking about it harmonically in terms of the chords, but it's the way that you approach the chords and the way that you do it fluidly with a sense of rhythm that's very light. And Monk really, he's not exactly a bebop pianist in the sense of Charlie Parker, but because he was writing his own language at the time, and that language went into fulfilling the development of the sound of bebop, he's considered one of the most important people in bebop. But in many ways, he felt that he didn't get the recognition he deserved. There's a quote from him that says, and this is in this lovely book by Robin Kelly, I feel like I have contributed more to modern jazz than all of the other musicians combined. That's why I don't like to always hear Gillespie and Parker brought the revolution to jazz, when I know most of the ideas came from me. Dizzy and Bird did nothing for me musically. They didn't teach me anything. In fact, they were the ones who came to me with the questions. But they got all the credit. They're supposed to be the founders of modern jazz when most of the time they only interpreted my ideas. Most musicians know this, which is why they all adopted 52nd Street Theme, which is one of his tunes. It's my music. Round about midnight, dizzy atmosphere. It's my feeling that through playing with me, by copying my harmonies, by asking me for advice, by asking me how to get the best sound, how to write good arrangements, and relying on me to correct their music, they composed themes that came directly from me. Meanwhile, I wasn't even able to find a gig. Sometimes I couldn't even enter Birdland. Do you realize what it's like to be a musician, to hear his own compositions, and not to be even able to get inside a club? You know? So, I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, you know? He really had a hard time, but there were some reasons
The year of the
for
quote,
that.
Gene?
What?
The year of the quote?
Yeah.
This was a quote, I'll tell you what, I'll leave the book out and afterwards we can figure it out. I don't know, to tell you the truth, but it's on page 105. There's a lot of truth to that, to what he's saying. I mean, he really did kind of reinvent the language, which is why he gets all the props that he deserves. But on the other hand, there's some reasons why he wasn't allowed in the clubs. Like, for example, in Birdland, that particular story, I read up on that and found out that the owner of the club had just bought a brand new Steinway grand piano. And Monk put his drink on the music desk, and he wouldn't move it after the owner politely asked him to do so. And this happened, you know, and all night. And finally the owner said, "You're not playing here anymore." You know, it's just because of the sense of respect for the instrument. And Mr. Bill and I, we believe that you should not put liquids on the piano. But anyway, I mean, there's reasons for things happening, but it is also true that Monk was a great pianist and that he came up with a lot of the ideas on his own. Okay, now let's get back into the music here. Okay. Let's go to when Monk was playing at Minton's and he got recognized by Blue Note Records. Okay, now this is back before Robert Glasper. This happened back in 1948. Okay, he was getting some good press and people were finding out about him, and so he got a record deal with Blue Note Records. And he was back in those days, and actually still, Blue Note paid for rehearsals. So they were like, "Mr. Monk, you write some awesome tunes. We want you to go in the studio and record with whoever you want, and we're going to pay you to practice." So he took this very seriously. And in fact, he came out with two recordings, two CDs worth of material. Of course, it's a lot more than, you know, back then it was many, many records. And this is what it looks like. This is one of them. Here's the other. The Genius of Modern Music. That's what this is called. It was released as the Genius of Modern Music. Again, you know, he thinks pretty highly of himself. But on the other hand, there was a reason. And these tunes are incredibly difficult. It's very interesting to see. I mean, there's 18 tunes on each CD here. Okay, 36 tunes. I mean, well, some of them are outtakes, but still, it's amazing to think that they went in and recorded all these. I mean, that's a lot of music, and it's really, really difficult. the first time he went in with Blue Note, he went in with a band that wasn't quite up to his level of expertise, but nonetheless, the melodies are really cool. So what I want to do is play for you two of the particular tunes that happen, well, one with the band and one without the band, okay? This one that we're going to listen to is the first recording that he did with Blue Note, and it's called Humph. Listen to the melody. It's like so intricate. Saxophone player is no way near his level in terms of the improv. He's just skating. He's good, but he's not great. So there we go. That was Humph. But the melody is like, it's like crazy. Can you imagine trying to learn that? And he was trying to teach it to them by ear. You know, there's stories of him like with a whole big band, and he's trying to teach everybody their part by ear. And then he gets mad because they don't have it down. You know, he's a very difficult person in some ways. But he knew what he wanted, and that was his brilliance. And he wanted something that was just magnificent. Let us now go to another song that he recorded for Blue Note, and this time he had an all-star band with Milt Jackson on the vibes, and I think it was Kenny Dorham on trumpet. So this is the same like a year later, but he's actually got a band that can play his music. So let's hear what that sounds like. This is called 4 in 1. On the drums. Remember that Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were like the giants of the bebop movement, and he didn't get much work with them. It's kind of odd the way that worked out. He thought he was ostracized from the. I don't know why, but he finally got a gig with Norman Granz, who was one of the big producers at the time. But he put them with Buddy Rich, and Buddy Rich is a great drummer, but he's a swing drummer. So, but nonetheless, this is a pretty cool record. This is a record with Buddy Rich and Curly Russell on bass, great bass player, Monk, Dizzy, and Bird. But then when you listen to it, you realize that all the pieces are Charlie Parker's and Dizzy Gillespie's, and that they didn't include even one of Monk's pieces, and that's what he was really best known for, was his compositions. So he felt a little bit insulted about it, but still, it was a record date, there was money, he was like, okay, I'll do it, you know, and he plays great. But he gets a very small, you know, he doesn't get a lot of play or a lot of face time in this particular recording. The piece that we're going to hear is a blues by Charlie Parker called Bloom Dito. Pretty amazing saxophone part here. Let's listen to Bloom Dito. This is Bloom Dito right here. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to keep cutting these off. I hate cutting it off these really nice places, so please excuse me. Okay, so this is the Blue Note era, and now we're out of that. And during this time, a couple of things had happened. One was that he had gotten busted. He had gotten arrested for having like a teeny little bit of pot, and he had to go to jail for 30 days for that. And he lost his cabaret card. Back in those days, back in the 40s and 50s, you had to have this card in order to play in New York City and any place that sold alcohol. And you would, if you get arrested, you lose your cabaret card. And so it was a really big deal for him because during this time he couldn't play in the clubs, and he would have to go to like Philadelphia or Baltimore or whatever and play because he couldn't play in his own town of New York. So it ended up being a real struggle for him and his family because they didn't have the income that he was getting from playing the gigs around town. So that was one of the things. But on the other hand, things were still good for him. He was playing and getting better known. He got some really good write-ups in some of the more popular jazz magazines. And he got a different record deal. He got a record deal now with Prestige Records, which was another really good, prestigious record label. And this one, they did not pay for rehearsals, so they just allowed the guys to go in and kind of do what they wanted, and you know, without rehearsing. So fortunately, Monk had this cadre of people who kind of knew his music. So he started out by going and doing some trio dates with really amazing musicians, with drummers like Max Roach and Art Blakey, and just a top-notch group of people. After a couple of those dates, he decided he wanted to do some quintet work. He went in with a young Sonny Rollins, and some great music was made. But there was one recording that I found that I didn't know before, and that was a recording with, I was mentioning it earlier to Bill, Ray Copeland on trumpet and Frank Foster on saxophone. And so this is now in the LP era. Before they were in the era when they only had 78s. So now they could have some longer playing music. And so he did this one piece which is called Locomotion that I absolutely love, that I had never heard before, planning for this presentation. So I want to play a little bit of that piece for you. Unfortunately, we don't have time to listen to the whole thing, but I want you to hear it. He's going into a different feel right now. He's got this real nice sense of looseness. Yes, this is a monk composition called Locomotion. There? Yes. Thank you. It's getting like he's got the space to be deep. I'm feeling like a whole new vibe is coming now. And if you can find this record, it's on. This is a prestige record, Thelonious Monk with Frank Foster, and I don't remember the actual name of the record, but it's just so good. The whole record's like this. Locomotion, that's the name of this piece. Okay, let's move forward. Right after this, he got the opportunity to go to France, where he met the Baroness, Nika Koningswater. The Baroness, do you know about her?
No.
Well, this is a book that she wrote, and I'll leave it up here. And it's a very intriguing thing. The Baroness was a very well-to-do lady who was really into jazz. And I'm going to just leave it at that because there's a whole great story behind her. And she was a lovely human being who really supported the music and was a very kind soul. And she has this book which is really intriguing. It's called 3 Wishes. And she asks everybody that she knows what would be the 3 wishes that they could have, for the world or for themselves. And then she took pictures of all these great jazz musicians because she hung out with all the people. You just open any page and there's Duke Ellington and Charles McPherson and Lex Humphries and Roy Brooks and Eric Dolphy and Bob Brookmeyer and Herbie Nichols and Horace Silver and Clark Terry. These are all the people she asks, what are the 3 wishes you have for the world? And then they respond. And she did that to Monk and Coltrane and Miles and everybody. So this is a beautiful book, and I'll leave it here. You can read it and look at it a little bit later.
The movie's very interesting.
I haven't seen it, but I'd like to see the movie. Yeah, I heard it was great. There's a movie about it.
It's made by, I think, her granddaughter.
Yeah.
What was the name of the movie?
We don't remember.
I can't remember the name of the movie. It was in the Women's
It was
Film
in the
Festival
Women's
last
Film
year.
Festival last winter, I think. Wasn't it? Or down in
Yeah,
Northampton?
yeah, it was.
I did see it, but I couldn't remember.
So the reason why I bring up the Baroness here is because she befriended Monk at a real difficult time in his life. He still didn't have his cabaret card, but she met him in France, and they became like the best of platonic friends. And she, of course, became very good friends with Monk's wife, Nellie, and it was a very important bond. In fact, the last 6 years of Monk's life he spent at her mansion in New Jersey because well, we'll get into that later. But at any rate, he met the Baroness, and that was an important thing that happened in France. But also, he went to Europe and found out that, hey, it's not that far away. You know, I can go there, and the people loved him. They didn't, in the beginning, he had a tough time because they used a trio, or he used a bass player and drummer from France, and they didn't know his music, and it was terrible. So he played a solo concert, and everybody was like, aha, there it is, and they loved him. Right after that, he comes back to New York, and he gets a gig with what's called the Modern Jazz Giants. Now, this is a very famous record, probably one of the most famous stories about Thelonious Monk, because he was playing with another very famous person, Miles Davis, okay? The Jazz Giants were Milt Jackson, and you know, a very famous group of people got together under the auspices of Prestige Records. They were all working for them at the time. And Miles didn't like the way that Monk comped. Comping is to play behind him. So there's stories that there was a brawl that happened because Monk got offended, that Miles told him he didn't want to comp behind him, blah, 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 blah. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and what happened was they made a great record, okay? And so what I want to do is to play for you this song called Baggs Groove. Baggs was Milt Jackson, the great vibraphone player. And they played this song together, and indeed, Monk does not comp or play behind Miles Davis's solo. And it's okay, you know. Miles Davis used the space beautifully. So let's listen to a little bit of that. Well, it's long. It's like a 7-minute song. I'll see if I can kind of fast forward this.
Miles is gonna get you, man.
I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. It's 56.
I think the jump's only occur when you first press the button. It's not like it's going to switch into a fast forward mode.
It's not very happy.
Maybe we should start over and be patient.
I'm supposed to be done at 8:15, and I got a lot of other great music. Okay, then we gotta listen to Milt Jackson. I mean, nothing wrong with that. I love Milt Jackson too. It's really worth getting a record, man. It's really good. I have it here somewhere. Here it is.
Jazz Giants?
Yeah, this one. There are two of them, so get the one with Bags Groove. That's the famous one. I mean, they're both great. It can't hurt to get either one of them. This is the other one. Okay, now we move along, and he got. Now we're moving to another record label. Every time he went to a new record label, he had to kind of reinvent himself. So here he is on Riverside Records, and this time he was with this guy named Orrin Keepnews. You ever hear him? Did you work with him? Very famous producer in New York, who did some great records and was really important for Monk. But he said, let's make some money on this. Let's do something different. People think you're a little too whacked out. So let's go with Duke Ellington. And he did the most beautiful Duke Ellington record. And so let's just listen to a little bit of It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing. This is Monk's version of that. Okay, we would listen to this if we had time.
Yeah, that sound, everything about his playing sounds very different to me
Yeah.
from everything we've heard before.
Yeah, well, that's because he's playing somebody else's music, and well, why else do you think it is?
He's changed.
It could be that he's changed, or he's trying to kind of present the Duke Ellington vibe. You know, it was said about this record that he respected Duke Ellington so much that he was really uptight until he heard back from Duke Ellington that Duke Ellington liked the record. You know, he was really, really uptight. There's a story his son tells about how he would just like be pacing back and forth. And then he got the call from Duke Ellington, says, "Hey man, I like your record." He's like, so, but he respected Duke Ellington so much, and I think that he tried to get into Duke Ellington's head to represent, you know, something that would be pleasing to him.
What was the name of that record?
I think it's called Monk Plays Ellington.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's a great record. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's, you know, they do Caravan or Inamel. I can't remember all the tunes, but it's great. Okay, now moving along. Again, Monk is getting some great publicity. He's invited to the Lenox School of Jazz, which happened down in the Berkshires, and was given all kinds of accolades there. He signed on a manager. There's this guy named Harry Colomby who became his manager. And it kind of changed his life, because here's this guy, Harry Colomby, who was a school teacher, you know, in New York, and he was this huge jazz aficionado and went to hear Monk all the time and didn't really have anything, you know, for himself. He was just, you know, loved the music. So Monk noticed this. Monk was very shrewd. You know, some people say, oh, Monk was totally out to lunch, but no, Monk knew what he was doing. And he hired Harry Colomby. He said, I want you to be my manager. And Harry's like, what do you mean? And he said, look, you're smart, you love jazz, and you take good care of people. You know, those are some good qualities. So he ended up getting a manager. And he had again gotten busted for something that Bud Powell had done. Bud Powell had some drugs, and Monk was with him, and because Monk didn't want to rat on him, he ended up going to jail for another 60 days, and this time he lost his cabaret card for a really long time. So you got this guy Harry Colomby, who with Nika, they went and they just fought in court, and finally Monk got his cabaret card again. And now he gets to go to this new, very cool place in New York called the Five Spot. Now, the Five Spot is a place where his whole career opened up. Is that telling me that time's up? Okay, good. Because this is a very exciting part. There's Miles. He's like, Gene. Okay, so anyway, what happened was they're here. Here's this great opportunity that's presented to him. In order for Monk to get his cabaret card, he has to have a gig. That was the rule that the judge gave. And so this guy Harry goes and finds this club where they had jazz, but they had a beat-up upright piano. But it was this place down in the Lower Village where all the artists would hang out, the poets and the artists and the musicians. And it was this club that was kind of in this rundown neighborhood, but it was a place where people really appreciated something new, something exciting, something original. They didn't want the old regurgitated stuff. They wanted something new because they themselves were trying to find something new, trying to rediscover themselves, or discover themselves, if I were, rediscover themselves. Anyway, so Monk got this gig, and it was supposed to be for 4 weeks. He was contracted for 4 weeks. He ended up staying there for 6 months, okay? And this is where he started to cultivate a band that would have a sound that was just so pure and could really interpret his music. And who was the saxophone player in that band? No. Although he did play with Mulligan, and it was pretty cool.
John Griffin.
Who?
John Griffin.
John Griffin came later. The second incarnation of the Five Spot, but he did play in the Five Spot. John Coltrane was the first saxophone player to play with him, well, after a week at the Five Spot. And it was incredible because John Coltrane had just been with Miles Davis, and Miles Davis supposedly had mistreated him, maybe slapped him or something like that, and Monk saw it. Monk said, "If you ever need a job, come see me." Well, he did. Because he had been on heroin and he kicked it cold turkey, and he went with Monk. And during this time, when he was with Monk, John Coltrane had a transformation. And he attributes it to being with Monk and seeing Monk's vision. And during this time, Monk, of course, had found the perfect foil, John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk. And it just so happened that he had a great bass player and a great drummer at the same time. Now, there is a recording of John Coltrane and Monk playing at the Five Spot. But about 5 or 6 years ago, they discovered a recording of a concert that happened at Carnegie Hall with the same band. And the recording quality is incredible. This is a true jewel. Let me see if I have this one here.
Here are we talking about?
59, 58, hold on.
He's back in this.
57, sorry, 57. This is, if you get one record, this is it. This is an amazing record. And each tune should be listened to very carefully.
What's it called?
It's John Coltrane and Thelonious Monk live at Carnegie Hall. It's so beautiful. And what I want to do is just to play for you the opening of the concert, because what happens is Monk takes about a 2-minute solo, and then the way John Coltrane comes in, it's like these guys are soulmates flying in heaven together. It's really incredible. So let's listen to the first song of this record. It's called, we're going to have to skip one. We're going to go to Monk's Mood, all right? Monk's Mood. Perfectly in tune piano, Carnegie Hall. So they're kind of joined at the hip or by the soul or something. And this record is full of moments like that, so I strongly recommend that you check this one out. It's a real beautiful.
Drums and bass in there too?
Yeah, there is bass. There's Shadow Wilson on drums and John, starts with a W. Wilbur Weir, thanks, on bass. It's great. And we'll hear just like a teeny little recording of another tune that they did at this concert that's really cool because you get to hear Shadow Wilson, who's a really underrated, great drummer, playing Epistrophe. This is a very cool tune that they have here. Epistrophe. So that was Epistrophe. Now, one of the things is after you hear, just one second, after you hear this kind of music, you realize, or this particular recording, you realize that if Monk had any technical limitations, they weren't present in this recording, right? So I think that maybe the reason why it appears that he might have had technical limitations might have been the instrument or the environment in which he was playing or something like that. But Monk really had a lot of control, and you could definitely hear it from this recording. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
How much is notated? How much is just...
Not much. The amount that's notated usually in these things is 32 measures, and then they continue, and they follow that same structure. The chords of that structure, they just keep repeating it over and over again. So that's what's.
Was he a reader?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He could read. In fact, back as a youth, he had won some competitions in classical music back when he was a kid in his early teens. Yeah, he definitely was a reader.
How much musical did he write?
He would write the tunes himself, the melodies,
And that
like that,
particular
yeah,
chorus.
and then they would be interpreted.
Got it.
So they would interpret the melody itself, and then they would improvise over the chord changes in the melody of the piece itself. Now, we're out of time, so what I want to do, I had like all these videos and stuff that I wanted to show you. They're
You
really
have to
cool.
do it for 3 hours next time.
I know, this is definitely not enough time to do Monk. I had 3 pages of notes and I got to 1. But what I want to leave you with is a piece. Now, let me just get a little bit into Monk's psychological state before we finish, because I think that's really important to acknowledge the fact that he was bipolar. You know, and people say, oh, he was just crazy, or he was high, or something like that, and then they demean his character. But he had a serious bipolar mental health issue, and unfortunately, that really took its toll at the end of his life. And he went into severe depressions. There were times, again, his son is interviewed on one of the videos that I have, which said that he would pace for 4 days at a time. Pace. Morning, noon, and night. And then just collapse for a couple of days. He would sleep, and then he would get up again. You know, he had these very manic and depressive kind of characteristics. Fortunately, he was out of commission for about 6 years. He came into it in the mid-'70s and gave a couple of concerts. I was fortunate to have been at one. I got to see him. Is anybody else here? I'm sure there's lots of people who've seen him. Yeah. Has anybody been lucky enough to see him? Great. Well, it's pretty remarkable to see him. He was an amazing human being, and we're very fortunate that he was on this planet. And at the end of his life, he went to London and recorded he did a concert that was recorded. It's called Monk's Classic Recordings. And we have the last thing that he recorded, and this is called Blue Sphere. And it's kind of interesting that in the last thing that I have of him, he's playing stride piano like he did, you know, back in the old days when he was playing the style of James P. Johnson and Fats Waller. So let's listen to just a little bit of that, and then we'll call it a night. Here we go. Got a mind of its own. Here we go. That was intentional. right.
Mr. Give me that again, I'm sorry.
Blue Sphere, S-P-H-E-R-E. And his middle name was Sphere.
Oh, that's
You
cute.
know, the Thelonious Sphere monk. You get that from his grandfather on his mother's side. So that's my offering. I thank you so much. I'm really happy you all came here. Thank you very much.